I've been in a lot of tense rooms in my life, but nothing compares to the silence that follows an act of cruelty. Not even the hush of a briefing room before an overseas mission, not the breathless quiet of surveillance ops when the target walks right past you. The courtroom that morning had that same heavy quiet, a silence so thick it almost vibrated. The case was supposed to be small, a neighborhood dispute, nothing more. My daughter, Lily, and I had moved to the Lake Haven Estates community 6 months earlier. The neighborhood was beautiful, but it came wrapped in an HOA that felt more like a private militia. I didn't tell anyone what I did for a living. I'd taken a desk job after years in field service. People assumed I was some kind of security consultant. Fine by me. It started with the mailbox. Ours was 2 inches taller than regulation height, and the HOA president, Karen Willoughby, decided that was an unforgivable offense. She began a campaign of letters, fines, and thinly veiled insults about how people should read the handbook before moving here. When she realized I wouldn't bite, she shifted focus to Lily. Lily was 16 and brilliant. She had cerebral palsy, which made walking difficult, but she never let it dim her confidence. She loved painting and helping neighbors' kids with homework. But to Karen, she was a target, someone cluttering the community by needing a ramp built onto our porch. Karen called it unsightly. The conflict escalated after Karen took pictures of our ramp and distributed them at the next HOA meeting, complaining that it ruined property values. I filed a harassment report and filed for a restraining order after she confronted Lily at the mailbox and called her a burden. That was what brought us to court that morning. I had dressed Lily in her favorite blue dress. She was nervous but determined. "Mom," she whispered as we sat in the courtroom gallery, "she can't hurt us here, right?" "Not here," I said, resting a hand over hers. "Not ever again." Karen sat at the opposite table, her lawyer beside her. She looked smug, hair lacquered into place, pearls shining like armor. She brought her entourage of HOA board members who whispered and exchanged knowing glances. I could see the judge already losing patience before we even started. The hearing began calmly. Our attorney presented evidence of harassment, photos, emails, and the recording of Karen shouting at Lily outside the house. Karen's lawyer tried to twist it into a misunderstanding, painting her as concerned about community standards. Then it happened. During a recess, I stepped outside to answer a quick call from work. Just procedural updates, nothing classified. Lily stayed in the courtroom with our attorney, sketching quietly in her notebook. When I came back, the room was chaos. Karen was standing over Lily, face red, yelling something about faking it for sympathy. My daughter's notebook had fallen to the floor. When Lily tried to pick it up, Karen slapped her. Hard. The sound cracked through the courtroom like a gunshot. People gasped. Lily froze, one hand clutching her cheek. Our attorney shoved between them, shouting for security. I was across the room in 2 strides. "What did you just do?" I demanded, my voice low, trembling not with fear but with something darker. Karen's eyes widened for half a second before she smirked. Maybe she'll learn some respect. The bailiff escorted her away while the judge called an emergency recess. The entire courtroom was buzzing, phones out, whispers flying. My daughter was shaking. I wrapped her in my arms, feeling her heartbeat race against my chest. I wanted to lunge at Karen. Every instinct in me screamed to act, to end the threat. But years of training whispered louder, control the scene, assess, respond with precision. I wasn't a mother in that moment. I was an operative evaluating a hostile. Lily's voice broke through the noise. "Why does she hate me so much, Mom?" I brushed her hair back gently. "Because she doesn't understand strength when she sees it." The judge reconvened 20 minutes later, visibly furious. Karen's lawyer tried to argue she'd been provoked, but even the courtroom security footage contradicted that. The judge ordered her detained pending assault charges. Still, the damage was done. Karen had shown everyone who she really was, but for me, that wasn't enough. The slap wasn't just an assault on my daughter. It was an assault on every ounce of trust I tried to have in a peaceful civilian life. After the hearing adjourned, I guided Lily out of the courthouse. She kept glancing over her shoulder as if Karen might appear again. I hated that look of fear in her eyes. In the parking lot, I looked up at the courthouse roofline. Security cameras perched like mechanical sentinels, and felt something stir deep inside me, a part of myself I hadn't let surface in years. I thought of the countless debriefings I'd sat through, the coded files I'd signed, the operations buried beneath official denials. They called me Ren back then, my field name. I'd handled counter-infiltration ops in Eastern Europe and data extractions across 3 continents. I'd seen corruption hide behind the faces of officials, politicians, even priests, but never had I seen evil wear pearls and carry an HOA rulebook. Lily squeezed my hand. "You're not mad, right?" I smiled faintly. "Mad? No, sweetheart. I'm focused." She tilted her head. "Focused on what?" "Making sure justice actually means something," I said. The rest of the day was a blur of police statements and phone calls. The local news picked up the story that evening. "OA president assaults disabled teen in courtroom," the headline read. The video clip went viral overnight. Karen's face was everywhere. But as the internet raged, something inside me stayed cold and calculating. Public outrage was one thing. Accountability was another. And I knew the system well enough to understand that people like Karen always had friends in the right places, judges, donors, quiet hands that could make things disappear. That's when the phone on my nightstand buzzed. A private number. I hesitated, then answered. "Agent Rowe," a familiar voice said. "We saw the footage." I closed my eyes. "I'm retired." "Not tonight, you're not," the voice replied. "We may need your expertise. Background checks, leverage networks, something about this woman doesn't add up. You free to talk?" I looked over at Lily, asleep, bruised but safe. My pulse steadied. "Send me the file," I said. And just like that, the quiet civilian life I built cracked open. Karen thought she'd slapped a helpless girl. She had no idea she'd awakened the one woman trained to dismantle threats from the inside out. By the next morning, the video was everywhere. Local channels ran it on loop. Online forums debated it under headlines that sounded almost unbelievable. But I learned a long time ago that truth spreads fastest when it's ugly. Still, outrage fades. I'd seen worse offenders walk free once the noise died down, and I wasn't about to let that happen. At dawn, I sat at my desk, coffee cooling beside the keyboard, and opened the encrypted workspace I hadn't touched since retiring. My old credentials still worked, an unspoken courtesy to a few of us who'd left the agency on good terms. Within minutes, I had a dossier on Karen Willoughby that would have made a private investigator blush. It wasn't espionage. Everything I accessed was public, though most people wouldn't know where to look. Real estate filings, donation records, litigation histories. She'd filed 6 lawsuits in 10 years against neighbors, contractors, and even the local animal shelter. Each time, she'd used intimidation to settle quietly. And each time, she'd hidden the cost behind her husband's business accounts. But one detail caught my attention, a nonprofit she chaired called the Lake Haven Community Wellness Fund. On paper, it collected donations for accessibility improvements in the neighborhood. In reality, not a single ramp or handrail had been built. Hundreds of thousands of dollars had vanished. I forwarded the file to a trusted contact in the Bureau's Financial Fraud Division with one line of text. "You'll want to look at this before the press does." By noon, reporters were already circling. The court incident had drawn national attention, and once someone unearthed her nonprofit, the story exploded. Karen's smiling headshot appeared next to phrases like embezzlement, fraud, and misuse of charitable funds. I didn't celebrate. I'd learned that real justice isn't a victory march. It's a slow, necessary unwinding. Lily watched the news with quiet satisfaction, though. Her bruise was fading, but the fire in her eyes had only grown. "Did you do this?" she asked softly. I smiled. I just showed people where to look. The next few weeks moved like a storm rolling in from the coast. Investigators subpoenaed bank records. Donors demanded answers. HOA members scrambled to distance themselves from Karen, insisting they'd had no idea. She tried to paint herself as a victim of cancel culture, but it didn't stick. Eventually, the board called an emergency meeting to elect a new president. They asked me to attend as a homeowner. I almost declined until Lily said, "You should go." People like her only change when someone braver stands in the room. So I went. The clubhouse was packed, every chair filled, tension thick as humidity. Karen sat near the front, pale and trembling but still defiant. When the meeting opened for public comment, I stood. "My name is Margaret Rowe," I said, my voice carrying through the hall. I moved here last year. Many of you have asked who I am, and until now, I preferred privacy. But since privacy seems impossible in Lake Haven Estates, here's the truth. I spent 22 years working for the Central Intelligence Agency. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's eyes went wide. I don't mention that to intimidate anyone, I continued. I mention it because I know the difference between oversight and abuse of power. I've seen governments crumble from arrogance smaller than what we've allowed to grow in this neighborhood. A murmur of approval rose behind me. This community deserves leadership that protects its residents, not persecutes them. You all saw what happened in that courtroom. You saw who she truly is. The question now is what kind of people we want to be. For the first time since I'd moved there, the room felt united. Votes were taken. Karen lost her title, her authority, and what little sympathy she had left. Outside afterward, she caught up to me in the parking lot. Her voice shook. You ruined me. No, I said quietly. You did that yourself. I just stopped you from ruining anyone else. She looked like she wanted to speak again, but couldn't. For once, the woman who had terrorized an entire neighborhood had nothing left to say. That night, Lily and I sat on the porch. The autumn air smelled of salt and pine. Somewhere down the street, kids laughed over a late game of tag. Do you miss your old job? She asked. Sometimes, I admitted. But I don't miss hiding who I am. She smiled. You didn't hide today. No, I said. And maybe that's the real victory. A month later, a letter arrived from the Department of Justice confirming that Karen Willoughby had been indicted on charges of wire fraud and charitable misappropriation. The case was airtight. She'd falsified donation receipts and routed money through shell accounts. Her trial made headlines for weeks, and when the verdict came down guilty on all counts, the same community she'd once ruled sent letters of thanks to the prosecutor's office. Life at Lake Haven Estates changed after that. The new HOA president was a retired teacher who believed in transparency and inclusion. The neighborhood that once frowned at Lily's ramp now offered to help paint it. As for me, I returned to my consulting work quietly, keeping my government contacts dormant again. The agency sent a brief note, excellent precision. As always. I smiled and archived it. Some nights, when the porch light flickers and the lake catches the reflection just right, I think about how close I came to letting anger dictate my actions. But vengeance is loud and brief. Justice is patient and permanent. Lily's ramp now has flowers along the edge, yellow daisies she planted herself. Every time I see them, I remember the look on her face that day in court. Shock, fear, then courage. And I remember what I told her afterward, that some people mistake kindness for weakness. She didn't anymore. Neither did anyone else in Lake Haven Estates.